Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and for today's video I am going to be making a lore spells tier list, and you can tell that this list is going to get very crowded. um, there are, I don't even know, I uploaded I think 101 files, which is kind of funny considering, Wizard101 101 files. Yeah, anyway, sorry. So 101 different spells or variations of spells, at least. Some of them only have one path, some have, three paths, like Lore Master and Spiritual Tribunal down here. But this is every single lore spell in Wiz. And yeah, I also went ahead and threw in stuff like Glimpse of Infinity, which is the Nova spell for fire. I did the Novus and Wallaru spells. I added those in just because, in my honest opinion, they count as lore spells because they've got the same pip cost as some of these others. It's like Deathly Depths of Deer Knight, same pip cost. They both use a school pip. They are sort of utility based, I guess, in the beat path versions. But yeah, that is my rationale for including those. So the tiers are a staple for PvP, a staple for PvE, A, B, C, D, F, and then Celestial Intervention has its own tier because, of course, it does. So let's get started with Apocalypse. This is a brand new spell added in the summer update. This is a fire spell, and I think it's hard to pull off. Maybe there's strats in PvE that can make better use of it, but in my honest opinion, I think that Apocalypse is worthy of the C tier. It's not too great in PvP, and then it's like I was saying, I can't really find a good way to use this in PvE, so we'll see though. Maybe that Basilisk Apocalypse strat could materialize in one way or another in maybe a challenge mode or something. So yeah, Angry Snow Pig. This will be going into the Celestial Intervention tier. I didn't expect to use it so soon, but hitting and then stealing the shield is a little bit mental, so it's going down there. For the B path of Angry Snow Pig, this actually pushes a weakness and then does its damage, and although the damage isn't much, the push factor in there I think is really good, and I think it's worthy of the B tier. I would never carry it myself because I have other ways to sort of beat death wizards to death, no pun intended, but this is a good place to put Angry Snow Pig in my honest opinion. Next up, we have Athena Battle Sight. Now this, in my opinion, is a very underrated card. I really like it. I used to use it all the time on my Legendary Myth. But I just think that there's better cards that Myth has these days. And although Athena is still good, it gives a 35 shield after hitting for 560, which is a lot. There are spells like Ether Golem, which is a Beast Moon spell that just sort of do its job but better. It's like it won't hit for as much, but it will protect you better. So Ether Golem honestly sort of throws out Splash Squatch Path B as well. So, but we'll get to that. Path A, Berry Surprise. F. Yeah, this is not a spell you can rely on at all. It's like for 2 pips into Storm Pip, it is good regardless of the effect that you get, but it's the effect that you want. And sometimes when you're trying to heal back up to full, you don't want to use a Berry Surprise and then gamble getting that 955 heal and then having it do 700 damage instead and not even kill the boss. So yeah, Path A, Berry Surprise, definitely going to go down into the F tier. It's just not that useful. The B path, on the other hand, is going to be our first entry into the staple for PvP tier. And yeah, Storm Wizards, like a lot of them, if they're going for like a healing strat or they want to leverage heal over times, this is a card that they pack 6 of. And this is obviously very good. It's a guaranteed, little hit, good for a shield break, but it also heals you for like over 4 rounds. For 860 before any multipliers, which is really good, especially considering Storm's health pool and resist is really not great at all. So this can help Storm sort of sustain itself, and it can help in certain matchups. So Berry Surprise will be going up there. Brave Sir Badger, this is also a new spell. I haven't really seen it be too great yet, so I'm going to leave it in the B tier, B for Brave and B for Badger. And maybe it could be better, but personally, it's like we're in an era where, in PvP at least, there's more aura counters, and a balance running this, it's like you might as well just use Samurai, because it does more damage and protects you, or even Savage Paw, which is coming up down later on this list. So that's just me, I guess. Braves for Badger going into B tier. Brimstone Revenant is our second entry into the staple for PvP, and this card, like, honestly, both of these cards would go in the A tier if we were talking about PvE, but Brim is such a good spell. 510 base damage for 4 pips, and it puts that 30 trap on. This is something that fires tend to pack 6 of, and for good reason. It does mass. Like, an open Brim is doing, like, around the 2000 range, because of fire's just really, really amazing pierce and damage stats. So, yeah, Brimstone Revenant, easy S tier for PvP. Our first entry into the S for PvE tier is going to be Bunyip's Rage. This is this is basically the new Tempest. Every Storm and their dog has been using this, and for a good reason. It does 625 base damage, and then you can use it on turn 1. Not much else to go over here. It's just a nutty card. It's almost as good as base Stormlord on the, like, with using less pips, and you can use it on round 1. So Bunyip definitely going to go in the S for PvE. For the B path, this is actually kind of a good heal counter, but I don't feel like it does enough damage to really be too great. It's like you might as well just use Triton at this point for a better effect, but maybe that's just me. I think Bunyip's Rage, the B path, belongs in the C tier. Burning Rampage, this is... Man, this used to really be great, because it used to be, you know, like you would use this card and it would just do its deferred damage a couple rounds later. But now that is 5 rounds later, and although it's gotten honestly kind of a nice little bump on the damage, it's not really worth using because everyone and their dog has overtime counters, and yeah, it's also just not great at PvE. It's like you could use this in conjunction with Apocalypse, but it's kind of a hard combo to pull off. Maybe it could work in PvE, but you know, these are 2 spells that you just need to have in the same hand at the same time, and yeah, I just wouldn't really recommend going for it. Burrowing Bane, this is our next entry into the staple for PvP tier. This is life's best overtime. It does honestly pretty good damage for life overtime. Split over 5 rounds, and it's 2 dots. So, you know, you get 2 of these on, and you can send out a Djinn if you wanted to. So, yeah, it's got good chip damage potential, and it's better the more buffs that you have on it. So, yeah, easy S tier for PvP. This is one of life's main spells. Camp Bandit. This is the only shift that exists in the game, that should exist in the game, rather, because it's actually a life spell, and life is supposed to counter damage over times, so I'm going to put that in the A tier. I wouldn't quite call it an S tier spell, because it does cost like a good few pips, as it should, but it's a shift. There's no reality in which I put a shift, which can literally just cancel out an entire overtime anywhere below the A tier. Next on the list, we have Catalan, and this is definitely going up here in the S tier for PvP. It is a staple for the Storm School. It does really good damage for 5 pips, and it'll put a 35% universal weakness on the target, which is, it's a good offense-defense move, and not much else to it. It's like spamming the spell is sort of the way that Storm can beat fire. It's good against balance, and, you know, obviously, you know, life it's good against as well. So Catalan, I think, does deserve to go up here in the staple tier for PvP. Base catch, the blade removal catch, it's good. It's good, but I think I would rather use the B path, which is definitely going to go up in the staple, just because it's like if you're using this, you might as well be using Leviathan, but it does do good damage for its pip cost. So I'm going to put base catch up here in the B tier, but the blade catch for the path B is definitely going to go up here in the S for PvP tier. Of course, This has its own tier, but the B path I actually don't think is abhorrent because it gives a protected 985 absorb, which is like an exclusive mechanic to this spell, interestingly. So, I don't know. Celestial Intervention, it's just kind of a joke of a spell. But having an absorb of almost 1,000 it can be nice in some instances, especially for 4 pips. It's like this can be good in, like, I don't know, Waterworks, because I recently did that for my budget walkthrough. If I had the spell, I would have probably used it because I would get a lot more value out of it than I would out of a frozen armor at a lower pip cost. So it's very situational, but I would put this B path with Celestial Intervention into the D tier. Alright, so our next S for PvE is going to be Count Crocula. This is Ice's best, round 1 hit. For obvious reasons. I mean, it still doesn't do that much damage, but it is still... I would recommend every ice packs at least one of these in their deck. So the B path, yeah, myth traps. Not even myths use this. Myths would much rather use Glimpse of Infinity over here over Count Crocula, because Glimpse will do 2 good things for you, being clear the shield and then put on 45 traps, whereas this Gambit shields. So yeah, Count Crocula B path, not even good in PvP. Not for the Myth Wizards, who would stand to benefit the most from that, but it's just not that great. Deathly Depths Path A. I am going to put this, honestly, in the D tier. It can hit for a little bit. I have seen some people try and make this a thing, but Colossus just does more, and I'll come back to this when we get to another spell later down on the list, but Colossus just does more for 1 more pip. Same with Tamauji, and it's like if you have 5 pips, which I don't really see too much when I'm doing Bathe. It's like, plus you need a death pip, so I don't know. It's a decent hit, but there's definitely better at around the same pip cost. So that's just my take on it. This one, the B path, definitely going in the F tier. I don't know why. Like Kingsell, for some weird reason, went on this short little spree of making a couple different ice lore spells. Just middle fingers for Storm specifically. This makes blades into Storm specific weaknesses. I don't know why that's a thing. I really couldn't tell you, but yeah. Yeah, just wouldn't really recommend that. And I guess another point to make for this is that you could just Golem and get more use out of that. So, yeah, Deathly Depths, just not a great spell in PvE or PvP. So, there's that. Deer Knight, this I think I'll put in the A tier. It's not quite a staple for deaths in PvE, but it is definitely a very strong hit. It does a lot of damage, and it has that nice little overtime for 3 turns, so Deer Knight's pretty okay. The B path, I think I'll put 1 tier lower down in the B tier because of the way enchants work. This will do more damage overall, but this will do more damage up front. So if you don't have Wobbegong Frenzy yet, and you have Deer Knight, you can use Deer Knight, the B path, to do more damage on turn 1. But if you are, not confident that you can kill on turn 1, I recommend using this over that. So, do what you want. Do what you want with Deer Knight. Speaking of Deer Mouse Trap. This is an ice spell that I really don't think is going to go much higher than the D tier. It's like, the trap it gives is admittedly pretty good. It's a 40 trap, but I don't ever use this spell when I'm PvPing, and I don't ever use it in PvE either, so Deer Mouse Trap, it's going to go into the D tier. Drop Bear Fury, this is the next entry on the S tier for PvE list. This is Myth's best turn 1 AoE, and I mean, for obvious reasons, it's 450 damage on turn 1, base damage, so pretty solid hit right there. And then Drop Bear Fury is also going to be the first and potentially only entry into the S tier for both of its paths, which I think is kind of funny because this is a spell that shouldn't exist. This will clear 4 shields, before it puts on a regular myth over time and then does its damage. This is a fire spell. Myth just has it. And I've said this a number of times. This spell shouldn't exist, but it does, and every myth abuses it to hell. So, as for PvP, it shall be. Divim's Resurgence. This is a balance spell. I think that if Balance's Duststorm Djinn didn't get absolutely neutered, this spell would be much higher, maybe in the B to C range. But since Djinn is not meta anymore and never really was and never will be at this point, I'm going to be putting it in the F tier. Glimpse of Infinity's Apath. I do like how much damage this does. But I mean, you know, Krampus is sort of just better for lower pip cost, and yeah, it's like Glimpse is sort of just in this odd position where it's 5 pips. It's right in between, you know, Krampus for 4, which does, you know, 630 overtime, which is pretty good, but then it's also in between Inferno Salamander, which can do way more for just 1 more pip. So yeah, I mean, Glimpse, it does good damage. It's just not a staple, so that's where I'm going to be putting it. For the B path, I'll put that in the A tier, and not for fires to use. This is another spell that Myth uses far to their advantage, and this spell, this B path, it's like, if, like, before Drop Air existed, this is what Myths were using. They would just clear shields with this, do a little bit of damage with that over time, and they would get 45% Myth traps for it. So this was Myth's best shield counter before this got added, so it's still good. It's just you don't usually see Myths using this anymore. But if Drop Air Fury ever gets rightfully, you know, removed, then people will, or Myths rather, will go back to using Glimpse of Infinity's B path. So that's pretty neat. For Goat Monk's A path, this honestly does do quite a bit, but I don't really see it being too useful. So if I'm going to be so for real. So Goat Monk, A path, going in the C tier. It does a lot, but, you know, it's sort of got the same issue the Deathly Depths does, except it just does slightly more. So it gets to be 1 tier above. And then this version of Goat Monk is going to be going into the PvP staple tier. This is another life spell that lifes use a lot, even though it got nerfed pretty significantly like a little bit ago. It is still definitely a good spell. Because it'll hit for around, you know, 1,000, just generally, and then it'll also heal for about 1,000, depending on how much outgoing you have. So this has a lot of value to it, and every life wizard is going to be using this spell. So Goat Monk, definitely a staple for PvP, and if you're looking to get into PvP, these are all the spells. Once this tier is finished up, this is the tier that you want to watch. This is the tier that you want to go for. So yeah, depending on your school, get all the ones that are up here. And some schools definitely have more entries into this tier than others. So keep that in mind. Gravestorm. This is an interesting one. I think I'm going to put it in the A tier right now, because while Wraith outclasses it, this does marginally less damage than that Wraith, but it costs 1 pip less. And a Death can... Like, this is a spell that can tilt the Death versus Balance matchup in PvP back in the Death's favor. So it's good against mana burn. And that, honestly, that earns it a lot of merit in my eyes. I think it's going to go way up as a result of that. The B path of Gravestorm, on the other hand, it's got a lot of potential, but as a Storm, you would need to Infect, you would need it to threefold, and then use this. I've only ever done this once. And it worked out really well, but it was also recruit gameplay, so don't worry about that. But yeah, B path Gravestorm, gotta go in the C tier. And there is another spell later down the list that can actually get you some really strong Storm Blades, just better than this, if that makes sense. So yeah, Gravestorm, gonna go in the C tier. Grendel's Amends. This yeah. And then this goes in the Celestial Intervention tier. So, where this version of Celestial Intervention got up into the D tier because it gave 1 protected 985 absorb, this ends up in the Celestial Intervention tier because it just gives 2 absorbs that are about, like, I don't know, 60% of the potential that this one is. So, yeah, it's like this will help you twice, but it'll help you less. So that's cool. So yeah, and then they both get countered evenly as well because the protection here, and then there just being 2 here. So this version definitely worse, and then this version it's not great. So especially because Myth is not a healing school, that it doesn't really have outgoing like that. So definitely an easy entry into the F tier for this one. Hammer of Thor. This I used to love the spell, but it got PvP banned, unfortunately. And Hammer of Thor, it's like it removes a weakness before it does its damage. This is insane. This is a really, really good card. It used to be amazing against Ifrit back when that was like a thing, where it would put like a -90 on you. This was Storm's answer to that, and Storm actually stood a good chance against Fire back in the day because of the spell. But it got banned, so tough. So it's going to go in the A tier because there are still some uses in PvE that I can think of for it. So yeah, Hammer of Thor, going to go up in the A tier. Okay, I tried to be funny, but this version is definitely going to go in the Celestial Intervention tier because it just doesn't do damage. I mean, Catalan outclasses it with a far better after effect as well as its damage, and then yeah, Catch is also just better than that. So how about it? This version of Hammer of Thor just sort of sucks. Next up, yeah, remember when I was talking about how KingsIsle just said screw you to Storm specifically? Well, it didn't end in Deathly Depths. It extended to Handsome Fomori as well, and this is a 40% Storm accuracy debuff. I actually thought about using this at one point in PvP back when I was getting, lightning bats on all my frostbites, and I thought this could be funny for that because it wasn't like a dispel where there'd be a dispel shield, but it's a lot of pips, and it's ultimately just not worth with mantles. So yeah, this spell sucks, and then this one does as well. So the mantle is not nearly prevalent enough to make it good, and then obviously it's PV banned, and then there are just better hits that you can use at this pip range anyway. Like even Deathly Depths is better than this, so that's kind of crazy to think about. Headless Horseman's A Path. It does. The damage on it is too good for me to really put it lower than C, but it's 5 pips now, and that's not what it was back in the day. It used to do 530 to 590 damage for 4 pips, which was insane, and I'm glad it got changed. But yeah, it definitely fell down the tier list as a result of that. This, on the other hand, with the Drain nerf on the horizon, this is going to become a staple for the Death School. I would highly, 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 highly recommend getting this once Halloween comes back around in October. I have a video from last October, actually, where I farmed the boss that drops these spell elements in 1 round. So that's a video y'all should watch if y'all are looking to get the spell once October comes back around. Hephaestus. This is going to be Fire's second entry onto this tier, and this is Fire's hidden bubble. This, yeah, it's like, it kind of sucks that Fire doesn't have a 4-pip hidden bub, but the extra damage that you get on this can be very, very helpful. So I would definitely recommend getting Heffy for your Fire Wizard in every case. So, okay, now we've got the Hero of Chrysalis spell. This used to be amazing. This used to be the bomb. But it got, the counters are just too good now. Because like back when people wouldn't carry like overtime counters just out the ass, this spell was really, really good. But now it's not as good anymore because it's just too easily countered. And deferred dots just in general, it's like I was talking about with Burning Rampage. It's just they're not as great anymore. So Hero of Chrysalis gonna go in the C tier. Although there is still something to mention with Apocalypse, this and deferred dots, they go together well. It's just you've got to figure out how to use them in conjunction with one another. So that's just kind of what's up. Ice Elemental. This spell, this is one of Ice's better additions as of late. It's a nice little hit and weakness, but the damage is a little not great. It's definitely better than Angry Snow Pig, but I wouldn't really say it's a staple. I don't think you should bust your ass getting this. but if you have it, it can be okay. So, yeah, Ice Elemental, I'll give it a B tier. For the next spell, we have Apath Improbable Gaze. I have seen Myth Wizards use this here and there. It's sort of like a stronger Minotaur for the same pip value, just with an ice pip, and I think that's pretty cool. It's just you can't make TC of it, so it's sort of harder to pull on demand. But it's a pretty okay spell. I like it. I'll give it a B tier. So the B path of this, it just does a lot less damage, and if you're gambiting traps for a 60 shield, I personally just wouldn't. This is going to go in the F tier. Keeper of the Flame. This spell makes me sad, because if it rightfully got a 50 damage buff on all of its tiers, this spell would be a menace. It would compete with Brimstone. It would be up in here, but it doesn't. It's not up there because the damage on it sucks. So tough. But this spell has a lot of potential if the devs ever decide to reevaluate it. But for now, I'm going to give it a B tier. Next spell on the list is Death's Divum Kia, and this does minuscule damage for 4 pips, and it gives a 35% Universal Blade. Personally, I'm going to put that in the D tier. It's just not great. Krampus, Apath. This does honestly solid damage and gives a mantle, which is insane. I was playing Grand PvP a while ago on my Storm, and somebody used, I think, 2 or 3 of these on me, and one of them eventually worked, and I died. So, yeah, I think this should be PvP banned, and it would then fall down the list. So, yeah, but for right now, you know, this is for some reason allowed in the game. So, for that reason, I'll give it A tier. But the B path of Krampus is your next fire staple spell. It's just so good because it's 4 pips for a double overtime, and then you can also spam this to just like detonate it as you go along. It's like you put up a furnace and then use 3 of these in quick succession, and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got 3 overtimes on, or no, it's probably more than 3 overtimes on, but you're detonating them as you go, which can really overwhelm your opponent, especially if they don't pull Stormzilla, which can like easily just win you a match. So Krampus, this also works well with Ifrit, Path B, and what's not to love about that? So Krampus going to go into the S tier for PvP. Lord of Night, F tier. It's a drain, so I can't put it down here, but yeah, Lord of Night, not worth getting at all. So now we have the 3 Lore Masters. This Lore Master is the one that I use personally. It's sort of cheeky, you know. It'll put up the weakness, like a weaker version of the weakness. It'll also do slightly less damage, and then it'll also give that little 25% mantle, which is kind of funny. Maybe one of these days somebody will fizzle my 25% Lore Master mantle, but that day is not today, and I am going to be putting it in the A tier. As a result, it's good, just not a staple. This version of lore is also going to go in the A tier, but this version of lore is going to go up here into the staple tier because it does good damage and it adds a much more reliable after effect. If you lore fire a bunch, that can give you the win. So definitely I would say go for the Path C on Lore Master. Just don't do what I do. Because as funny as this is, I'm only doing it for like novelty reasons, because balance is good enough. It's like I can stand to give up a little bit of damage, right? So yeah, Luminous Weaver. This spell used to be amazing, but after its PvP ban, it has sort of fallen from grace. I'm going to put it in the B tier though, just because it's a nice little hit and weakness. Personally, I think it's good, just not what it was. But its B path is going to create the second line here up in the staple tier. This is Life's 3rd staple lore spell. Definitely get this because it does pretty good damage and it gives you a good couple effects. It'll give you a 20% Life Blade and a 20% Guiding Light, which works really well in conjunction with Goat Monk. So keep that in mind. Lumi and Goat Monk work really, really well together. Monk of Morning. This is a death hit and shield. That does good damage. I think I'm going to put it in the A tier, and I would expect to see more deaths using this in the coming weeks once strains get nerfed. So, yeah, I don't know why they gave that this, but they did, and hooray, right. Nautilus Unleashed. This is It's not great. I'll say that. It's just not great. And then this version of it is not that much better. It'll push a trap, which is kind of cool, and then it'll do, chromatic overtime damage. But don't let this fool you. Don't let Burning Rampage fool you. These both use fire damage. They just turn into overtimes of your school. So, yeah. Yeah, Nautilus is not great. Ninja Piglet's Path A. This is actually a pretty decent hit for 4 pips. I mean, 560 on the high end. That is nuts for balance. But it's I wouldn't prioritize it over Lore Master. Just because Lore Master, you can really rely on Lore Master. So, I mean, not so much with Ninja Piglets. So, Piglets is still good. It hits for quite a bit, but I like Lore is better. That's what I'm getting at. And the B path, you might be able to surprise somebody with this one of these days, but yeah, it's decent because it's like a balanced bomb dot. But for the same reason the Hero Chrysalis is down here, this won't get any higher because OT counters are just better. It's like the counters are better than this, so I wouldn't prioritize it. I would definitely just try and go for Lore, especially because farming this is just a pain generally. So there's that. For Myth's next entry onto the staple list for PvP, we have Ninja Pigs. And if it wasn't going up here, I would probably put it in the A tier, just because it is good. Like, look at the damage this thing does. It is nuts. This for 6 pips, this does 735 base at max tier. This is crazy. Like, if you are a Myth, definitely go farm Takanobu, get the spell. I don't really need to say much more on it. So, Phantasmania, this is going to be the next entry into the staple tier for PvE. This is Fire's Wallaru spell, and you can kind of see a pattern. It's like, I wouldn't expect to see too much up here, but yeah, Fire's Wallaru spell, 505, pretty good. Not much else to say. Who would ever use this? It's like, if you clear 3 traps on yourself, you can get an extra 25% on a heal over time per trap. But this is below F tier because of that. So how about it? Anyway, Pigsy, I will put this up into the S tier for PvE. It's just a really strong heal. 4 pips, 800 health. That is 200 HPP for your whole team. Pretty good, I would say. And then for this, I don't think I would put it up here, but maybe in the A tier, just because it's a really strong heal over time. Not much else to say. And it's just, it heals for a lot. I can't really say much more than that. So Queen Calypso, this is also going to be in the A tier. I've always loved this spell because it puts that 30% trap down before it hits, and it does that on the entire enemy team. So this can be like a really good support spell. You can hit for a good bit with that super high base damage for only 4 pips, and you can set up a trap for another hitter. So really, really good spell. And then this version of Queen Calypso, it used to be better back before it's like Storm had better heal counters, but this was a good answer to life for the Storm School back in the day. So yeah, it was good, but I mean, an 80% infect is an 80% infect. It's kind of hard to argue with that, but yeah, there's better heal counters nowadays, I would say. So Queen Calypso will go into the B tier. Rainbow Serpent, this is going to be the next entry up here. This is Balance's Wallaru spell. Not much else to tell. For the B path, this is also kind of a cool heal counter. Let me just briefly explain to you what this does, because it's like when people complain about hieroglyphics on spells, it's like, I don't even think the spell inspect feature that got added back in spring does an adequate job. So let me run it down for you. 600 damage for 1 pip, 1 death pip, and 1 storm pip, so a total of 5. Selective target, which means you can hit like 1 person, 2 people, 3 people, that type of deal. You can choose. And it will give a 60% chromatic blade to the caster and a 60% chromatic weakness to the target per heal over time that is on the target with a maximum of 2. So it's a very convoluted spell and very situational, but it's good at what it does. It's just there are better spells. So Rainbow Serpent, gonna go in the B tier. Rat Spin, I will put this into the A tier. I think it's just a good spell. It's just that there's better for life wizards, and you know, it's still a good hit. It's still a good AoE. Just I'll put it in the A tier as opposed to S, because there is a spell down the line that does marginally better than it. So how about it? Ranger Knight will be going up here for the same reason. Both tiers will be it's like the same thing as Deer Knight pretty much, except just for ice. And this one does give a better after effect than this Deer Knight, because this is a 20% plague, I think, and then this is a 60% shield. So 60% shield on an AoE, pretty good, I would say. It's nice to use for PvE, and it works better with enchants, so can't go wrong there. And then this also, for whatever reason, just sort of does more up front. I couldn't tell you why, but okay, I'll take it. Revolutionary Strike, D tier. Yeah, it's like this could help with like Berry Surprise, but nah, it's just not great. It's a very cheap lore spell. It's the only one that is a rank 1 spell outside of like the balanced ones, and it only costs, you know, a total of 3 pips to use, which is the lowest out of all. But you know, it's not great. I wouldn't really try and go for this, especially because it's the Devo, and farming Lightbane is just a pain. So there's that. Sacred Charge. This is the next one up. This does 6 pips in total. It does decent damage, I guess, and then puts on an Absorb. So I think I'll put that in the D tier with its B path going up slightly higher, just because of the damage it does, and it also gives you a Mend aura after it hits. So I think that's neat. It's like a hit and heal prep type of spell. So can be okay. That's my thoughts. Samurai. This is actually how I beat Don Manzana on my balance when I was questing at the max. This actually does really good damage for 5 pips, and you could just kind of spam it, because it's technically only 4 pips. 4 pips for a maximum of 650 base. So that's pretty cool. The trade-off is that the target gains a pip, but I mean, a 4 pip, 650 damage spell, I think is pretty good. It's banned for P for a reason, so in case there was any confusion. For this Samurai, the B path, I think I'll put this in the A tier, because it does good damage. You can pip conserve it, and it's sort of like what Athena could have been. It's like this just sort of works better on a balance than this does on a myth. So it's like a weird rationale, but that's what we're going with. Samurai is just a better spell in my opinion. Savage Paw, I think I'm going to put this in the D tier just because Samurai does the same damage for the same pips, and it gives a better after effect, in my honest opinion, being a shield, which will sponge up some pierce, as opposed to a blade, which can just get weaknessed. So how about it? Oh, this is a doozy. Top Path Scales of Destiny. I'm going to put this in the A tier. This is the new Hydra. So it does like a lot of damage, and yeah, I mean, you can just sort of tell it's very good for that. And then for the B path, easy entry into the staple list, because this is Balance's best spell, right, or one of Balance's best spells right now. Sorry, I forgot Mana Burn existed, but this is definitely a spell that you want to have for Peeve, especially like max upgraded, just because it does all of that damage, and then it'll also give you a 65 shield if they have a shield, and it'll also echo a heal. So how about that? Okay, next up, Ship of Fools. I think that I'll put this up here in the S tier, just because like the A path is an AoE drain. You don't have any others that you can use on turn 1, so S tier for PvE, obviously, because it's PvP, like all the other AoEs. For this version, I'll put it honestly in the F tier, because Wabagong Frenzy is just better like that. So, and you will see it later. So the Spiritual Tribunals, I think I'm going to put all three of these in the D tier. They just, it's like a Spectral Blast, but honestly slightly weaker. So, yeah, Spiritual Tribunal going to go in the D tier, in my opinion. Splash Squatch, the A path, actually does quite a bit of damage. But, yeah, it's got quite the range on it, and it doesn't quite compete with Pigs that costs one more pip. So it'll go in the B tier. And the same goes for its B path. This is good at stealing tower shields, but if there's like a myth, or like a spirit shield rather, like a myth will just sort of fold to that, or Splash Squash will fold to that rather, and myth just has better shield counters anyway. And Ether Golem, for the same amount of pips, it'll do, I think, a little less damage, but it'll have borderline the same effect. So yeah, Splash, I'll give both of them a B tier. Starspawn, this will go in the D tier. Same as Deathly Depths. Yeah, it's for the same reasons. This version of Starspawn goes in the F tier. It's just not useful. It can be a cool little trap counter, but there's better trap counters that life has. Next up, we have Tree of Strife's A path. This is a very strong hit. Not even gonna lie, this is, you know, a total of 5 pips to do 850 base. It's kind of hard to argue with that. So, yeah, this is a very, very good spell, and it is Storm's best hit that it can use on turn 1. And the best hit in the game that you can use on turn 1. So, it's good if you're farming like a single boss without a minion, and you're just like trying to help your low-level teammate or whatever. So, Tree of Strife, A tier. That's how it is to me. And then the B tier, I think I'll also put up here. It does good damage, and then the little gambit on it is pretty good as well, because I think this can set up a Jin in one turn. I don't know if it's still bugged, but if this can set up a Jin in one turn, it definitely belongs up here in the A tier. And then for the next one, White Heart Fire, this has a lot of potential. If it just gave, you know, like, if this got split into 2 heals, I think we would see this get used a lot more. But it doesn't, so it's going to end up in the D tier. It's still a good hit and heal. It's like a Goat Monk for fire, but it's just not what Goat Monk is to life. So White Heart Fire going to go into the D tier. Winter Moon, like Deathly Depths, Colossus just does more for the exact same pip cost. Like 5 more damage. So no point in farming this, especially now that Winter Moon is PV banned for being a stun. Wabagong Frenzy, this is going to be the next entry up here into the PvE S tier. And yeah, I mean, same reason as all the other Wallaru spells are here. It's a good turn 1 AoE. So love to see that. This version of Wabagong Frenzy, I actually like this a lot. Okay, don't put it in the S tier, but this is a good blade counter, because this is the only card in the game that does blazes to shields. I don't know why Death has it. I don't know why Ice doesn't have a card that does the same, but Wabagong Frenzy is a good blade counter. I like it. So, yeah, it'll go up here into the A tier. Death has better blade counters ultimately, and I wish Ice had a spell like this, but oh well, right? So, Wabagong Frenzy into the A tier. Reckonetin, I thought this was going to be better than it was, but yeah, I mean, Keeper does marginally more damage, and yeah, Reckonetin, I'll just give it a D tier. It removes 3 shields and then does its damage, which is good, but it just doesn't do as much damage as I would have liked to see, and Drop Air Fury, just amazing for shield clearing. So, yeah, Drop Air is just going to clear the spell with ease. So, last up, we have the Zen the Bandits, and this one obviously going to go into the S tier for PvE. Same reason all the others are here. Wallaru spell, good AoE. This one, on the other hand, this is what I was on about when I was talking about Gravestorm. This, if used correctly, like if you bury into this as a storm, you can get 70 blades, and your opponent has to answer to that somehow. So it is a little bit of like it's pips you got to use, but it could be some crazy tech. I might see if I can experiment with that at some point. So, Zan the Bandit, A tier. And that is going to cap off this 45-minute recording. I didn't even realize it was going to take this long, but thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more. And I will see y'all later.